Hi everyone. I'd like to read another extract from this book I've edited called Idries Shah Remembered. This piece was written by an electrical engineer who knew my father in the 1950s, and his name is Dr. Frank Whatney. This is how it goes. I've called it Fundamental Truths. My first meeting with Idries Shah was in the autumn of 1957. Though it was not in the way that most people later came to know him. At the time, I had no inkling at all that he had traveled widely or had already written books on cultural themes. To me, Shah was simply a man with an insatiable curiosity about the world, particularly about transistor technology, which was my own field of expertise. I was working as an engineer, knee-deep in semiconductor development, at a time when transistors were just beginning to redefine modern communication. Our shared interest in affordable shortwave radios brought Shah and I together, although even then it was clear that he was an unusual presence in that world. Neither an academic or a technician, he would cut through the dense technical jargon of my colleagues with an almost supernatural clarity. Most of the men I worked with, brilliant as they were, would get lost in their own terminology, their calculations, folding over themselves like intricate pieces of origami. Shah had no patience for unnecessary complexity. He would listen carefully to the most elaborate discussions, and then, with a wry smile, he'd say something like, "Yes, but isn't what you're describing just an unnecessary redundancy? You're talking about wave propagation, and yet you're missing the essence, how the crystal structure itself dictates the signal's stability." And invariably, he was right. At first, I would wonder how he had acquired such an intuitive grasp of physics. It soon became apparent that he had a talent for stripping any subject down to its fundamental truths. This was evident not only with transistor technology, for Shah could talk just as fluently about metallurgy, aerodynamics, or even behavioral patterns of electrical charges in microcircuits. He had no formal training in these fields, yet he could absorb information at a pace I had never encountered before. I remember late one night, we were sitting in a workshop strewn with circuit boards. He picked up a small transistor, turned it over in his fingers, and he said, "You know, Frank, these things are not unlike ideas." "How do you mean?" I asked. "Well, they operate in a way most people fail to see. You have an input, a tiny impulse, almost insignificant, but under the right conditions, that impulse is amplified," he said, "beyond all proportion, provided the structure allows for it. The whole thing is greater than the sum of its parts." I assumed, of course, that Shah was only talking about electronics. But years later, I came to understand he had been speaking about something much larger, about thought itself, about knowledge, and about how information must be structured in order to be truly transformative. By then, Shah was writing books, not about radios or physics, but about something I barely understood, Sufism. I remember being rather bewildered when I first heard about it. The man I had known as a razor-sharp mind in the world of radio technology had turned his attention to mysticism. It made little sense to me at the time. And when I finally sat down and read one of his early books, The Sufis, published in 1964, there was a blinding flash of comprehension. The same man who had once taken apart the tangled complexities of transistor behavior was now dissecting ancient systems of thought with the same penetrating clarity. He peeled away the obscurities, the contradictions, the layers of esoteric language that had obscured these ideas for centuries, even millennia, making them accessible in a way that no one had grasped before. I grasped then that he was working with the same tools, logic, pattern recognition, and an ability to perceive the fundamental structure beneath apparent complexities. His work in transistor radios had been an early expression of a much more profound ability, the ability to transmit knowledge itself. I felt fortunate to have known Shah in that earlier phase, to have witnessed firsthand the way his mind worked. To me, he was a real polymath, a man who existed in many worlds at once, whether it was physics or philosophy, engineering or esoteric wisdom. And as far as I'm concerned, he embodied that rarest of abilities to translate complexity into simplicity without diminishing its depth.